Hello everyone, this is Dr. Kother coming to you from Muscat, Oman. Today we will talk about ADHD, or otherwise known as Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. What is ADHD? If children have ADHD, it means they have difficulties with paying attention, like they find it hard to concentrate on tasks, being hyperactive. They may find it hard to sit for long periods of time. Controlling impulses. They may say or do things before thinking them through. Many children have these kinds of difficulties from time to time, but in children with ADHD, these difficulties happen most of the time and have a big effect on their daily lives. ADHD is a neurodevelopmental disorder. That is a problem with the way the brain or the nervous system grows. In ADHD, the different parts of the brain don't communicate to each other in a typical way. This is why children with ADHD might have more trouble than their peers with thinking, learning, expressing feelings, or controlling their behavior. We don't know exactly what causes ADHD. ADHD symptoms fall into two groups. The first group being the inattentive symptoms. This means that a child doesn't pay close attention to details and may make careless mistakes, has difficulty following instructions and finishing tasks like homework or chores, has difficulty keeping attention on things and is very easily distracted, is often distracted by little things like someone moving or a sound outside of a window, has trouble remembering everyday things, avoids tasks that require a lot of mental effort, like schoolwork or homework, doesn't seem to listen when spoken to, has trouble getting things in order or doing things on time, and often loses things like schoolwork, pencils, books, or mobile phone. The second group is hyperactive and impulsive symptoms. This means a child fidgets a lot and can't sit still, runs around and climbs on things in inappropriate situations, is on the go all the time, finds it hard to play or take part in activities quietly, talks a lot, has difficulty staying seated at school or at the dinner table, is impatient and doesn't wait for his turn, blurts out answers before the questions are finished, interrupts other people's conversations or games, uses things without asking. Just because your child has symptoms like the ones I just listed doesn't always mean your child has ADHD. Other conditions or problems can cause behavior that looks like ADHD. This is why your child needs to be properly assessed. So if you're worried about your child's behavior for any reason, make an appointment to see your child's pediatrician or an educational psychologist. Children might be diagnosed with one of three types of ADHD, depending on the symptoms. First one being the ADHD combined type. Children with this type have both hyperactive, impulsive, and inattentive symptoms. They tend to have trouble concentrating, are fidgety, are restless, and are always on the go. They often act without thinking. The next one would be the ADHD inattentive type. Children with this type may have inattentive symptoms. They tend to have trouble concentrating, remembering instructions, paying attention and finishing tasks, and they may often lose things. And the last group would be the ADHD hyperimpulsive type. Children with this type mainly have hyperactive and impulsive symptoms. They're always on the go, have trouble slowing down, and often act without thinking. When professionals and specialists are working out whether a child has ADHD, they usually use guidelines to carefully check the child's symptoms. They look at things such as age. The child's symptoms must begin before the age of 12 and older than 5 before an ADHD diagnosis, because there might be other reasons for difficult behavior in younger children. Number of symptoms. The particular ADHD diagnosis depends on how many inattentive and hyperactive impulse symptoms a child has. Duration of the symptoms. The child must have had the symptoms for at least 6 months. Severity of the symptoms. The child's symptoms must be worse than other children of the same age and happen most of the time. Also, the symptoms must interfere with the child's life, both at home and at school. Diagnosing ADHD is not easy because ADHD can overlap with other conditions, but the right diagnosis means a child can get the right therapies and management plan for their condition. It is important to diagnose and treat ADHD as early as possible. The earlier it's diagnosed, the earlier you and your child's therapist can work on a plan to manage your child's symptoms. If you're concerned about your child's behavior, your pediatrician is a good place to start. Your pediatrician might refer you to a child psychologist or psychiatrist who can look at your child's symptoms and consider possible diagnoses. The diagnosis process might include most of these steps. Firstly, an interview with you and other primary caregivers, such as grandparents, of your child, an interview with your child, behavior checklist that you and your child's primary caregivers and the teachers fill out, discussion with your child's teachers and primary caregivers. Your child might also have other tests, including developmental, learning, educational, or IQ tests, language and speech and movement checks, general health checks, vision and hearing tests. Sometimes ADHD isn't diagnosed until later in childhood or the teenage years. This is when children have more schoolwork and go through social and emotional changes. Symptoms that you hadn't noticed before might become more obvious because of these challenges and changes. Children with ADHD might find the teenage years bring extra challenges. On the other hand, your child might also have built up some strategies to manage their symptoms better. Also, as your child with ADHD gets older, their ADHD symptoms might change or tone down. For example, your child might still have trouble focusing, remembering things, and thinking before they act, but they might be less obviously hyperactive. Some children with ADHD no longer have symptoms when they reach adulthood. Children with ADHD can be highly creative and can spend lots of time doing the things they love. They might be more open to trying new things than other children. They often enjoy using their energy on sports or dancing. Finding positive ways for your child to use their energy can be good for their self-esteem and help protect them against mental health problems. Life with ADHD can be challenging for children and their families sometimes. For example, your child with ADHD might have trouble falling asleep and staying asleep. Children with ADHD often have problems at school, including learning disorders, language impairment problems, and moving difficulties. And some children with ADHD may also develop conduct disorders and childhood anxiety, and teenage depression. ADHD is manageable. Specialists can work with you to develop techniques to help your child manage their ADHD at home and at school.